For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On a sweltering afternoon in July 1999, 42-year-old Dr. Aaron Rodriguez, his wife Samantha, and their 12-year-old daughter Chloe disappeared during what should have been a routine tour of India's majestic Taj Mahal. The family, in Agra for an international medical conference, walked through the monument's ornate gates, cameras in hand, excited to explore one of the world's most beautiful structures. They never emerged. Despite an extensive international investigation involving the FBI, Indian authorities, and Interpol, the Rodriguez family seemed to have vanished into thin air within the sprawling marble complex. For 20 years, colleagues at Boston General Hospital kept their photos displayed, hoping for answers that never came. Then, in 2019, a demolition crew working at an abandoned guest house in Agra made a discovery that would unravel a sinister operation reaching far beyond India's borders. This is the complete investigation into what happened to the Rodriguez family. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. On a sweltering afternoon in August 1999, the pristine white marble of the Taj Mahal gleamed under the Indian sun as thousands of tourists filed through its ornate gates. Among them were Dr. Aaron Rodriguez, his wife Samantha, and their 12-year-old daughter Chloe, a family whose disappearance would haunt the historic site for decades to come. The Rodriguez family had arrived in Agra 3 days earlier, following Aaron's presentation at a cardiology conference in New Delhi. Their visit to the Taj Mahal was meant to be the highlight of their first family trip to India. Security footage from the main entrance, timestamped 2:15 p.m., showed them passing through the gates, Chloe excitedly pointing her disposable camera at the magnificent dome while Samantha adjusted her silk scarf against the heat. What began as a routine tourist visit would become one of India's most perplexing missing persons cases. The family's official tour guide, Rajesh Mehta, had gathered his group of 12 tourists near the main entrance. As he began his introduction, a well-dressed man in a crisp white shirt approached the Rodriguez family, showing what appeared to be official credentials. The security cameras captured this brief interaction, the last confirmed sighting of the family alive. The morning had started normally enough. The Rodriguez family had enjoyed breakfast at their hotel, the Taj View, where staff later recalled Chloe's excitement about seeing the monument she had studied in her 7th grade history class. They had left their room in typical tourist fashion, cameras ready, guidebook in hand, and a bottle of water for each of them. By 4:30 p.m., when Mehta's tour group reassembled at the designated meeting point, the Rodriguez family was nowhere to be seen. Mehta, who had led tour for 15 years without incident, immediately reported their absence to security. The family had left behind their belongings in room 412, 3 suitcases, Samantha's jewelry, and Aaron's laptop containing his conference presentations. As evening fell over Agra, local police launched their initial search. They found the family's passports in their hotel room safe, along with several $1,000s in travelers' checks. Samantha's diary, recovered from her bedside table, contained entries about their trip, including their excitement about visiting the Taj Mahal. The final entry, dated the morning of their disappearance, mentioned meeting someone who had offered to show them the secret passages tourists never see. Security footage from various points around the complex showed the family following their mysterious guide toward the eastern gates at 2:45 p.m. They appeared relaxed and engaged, with Chloe skipping alongside her parents as the man gestured animatedly, apparently explaining something about the architecture. After that, they simply vanished. The next 24 hours became a blur of activity. Hotel staff, tour operators, and local police combed every corner of the massive complex. Hospitals were contacted, roadblocks were established, and missing persons bulletins were distributed throughout Uttar Pradesh. The American embassy in New Delhi was notified, and by midnight, FBI agents were en route to assist in what was quickly becoming an international investigation. The Rodriguez family's empty hut. El room became a time capsule of interrupted lives. A half-drunk cup of chai on the desk, Chloe's stuffed elephant on her pillow, and Aaron's medical journal open to an article he had been reading, all spoke to the ordinary morning that had preceded their extraordinary disappearance. On the desk calendar, Samantha had circled their planned return date to Boston, where Aaron's patients were awaiting his return to his cardiology practice. As the first day turned into the first week, the disappearance of the Rodriguez family captured international attention. Their case would become one of the most mysterious vanishings in the history of the Taj Mahal, a place built as a monument to eternal love that had somehow swallowed a family whole, leaving behind nothing but questions and a growing fear that something far more sinister than a simple disappearance had occurred beneath the shadow of the Great White Dome. Inspector Priya Gupta arrived at the Taj Mahal complex before sunrise the next morning, her team of investigators already gathering statements from the night security staff. The disappearance of an American family had escalated the case to the highest priority, and the pressure to find answers mounted with each passing hour. The security footage became their first focus. In the control room, operators replayed the grainy recordings, frame by frame. The mysterious guide's face was partially visible in several angles, revealing a man in his late 30s with a distinctive scar above his right eyebrow. He moved with the confidence of someone familiar with the complex, yet none of the authorized guides recognized him. Rajesh Mehta, the family's official tour guide, sat with investigators for hours, recounting every detail of that afternoon. The man approached them so naturally, so professionally, Mehta explained, his hands trembling as he sipped his fourth cup of chai. He showed something that looked like our official credentials. I was attending to other tourists, and when I looked again, they were gone. Other tourists from the group provided similar accounts. A British couple remembered the man mentioning exclusive access to areas normally restricted to visitors. An elderly Japanese tourist had photographed the family inadvertently in the background of his holiday snapshot, the mysterious guide gesturing toward the Eastern Gardens. The timestamp on the photo, 2:43 p.m. As FBI agent Sarah Kim landed in New Delhi, local police had already established a command center in the Taj View Hotel's conference room. Maps of the complex covered the walls, red pins marking the family's last known locations. Agent Kim brought with her a disturbing pattern: 3 other cases of missing tourists at major Indian landmarks in the past year, though none had involved entire families. The hotel room yielded more clues. Forensics teams found partial fingerprints on Samantha's diary that didn't match any family member. A business card discovered in the trash bin advertised exclusive tour, but the phone number led to a disconnected line. The card's paper and printing matched others linked to tourist scams in the region. Door-to-door canvassing of the surrounding neighborhoods revealed that several residents had noticed a white van parked unusually close to the eastern gate that afternoon. The van departed shortly after 3 p.m., but no one had recorded its license plate. A street vendor remembered seeing the family walking with a man matching the guide's description, heading toward that same area. Inspector Gupta's team expanded their search to guest houses and small hotels within a 5-kilometer radius. Each property was searched, every guest register examined. One guesthouse owner reported a hurried checkout that evening, a single man who had stayed for 3 days and paid in cash. The registration card bore a name later proven false. By the end of the first week, the investigation had generated hundreds of leads but no concrete answers. The Rodriguez family's dental records and DNA samples arrived from Boston, but there was nothing to compare them to. Their credit cards remained untouched, their phones never used after entering the Taj Mahal complex. Dr. Robert Chen, a specialist in medical tourism security, arrived from Singapore with a troubling theory. The targeting of a prominent physician during a medical conference fit a pattern he had observed in Southeast Asia. But without evidence, his concerns remained speculative. Another theory among dozens. The case attracted international media attention. Journalists camped outside the Taj View Hotel, their cameras capturing every movement of the investigation team. The Rodriguez family's story appeared on front pages worldwide, their smiling faces from happier times contrasting sharply with the growing fear that they might never be found. As the initial investigation phase drew to a close, Inspector Gupta faced the hardest part of her job, calling the Rodriguez family's relatives in Boston to admit they had no solid leads. The family's empty room was sealed as a potential crime scene, their belongings carefully cataloged and stored. The only certainty was that somewhere between the marble walls of India's most famous monument, 3 Americans had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that would take 20 years to unravel. As months turned into years, the disappearance of the Rodriguez family settled into the rhythm of a cold case. The once bustling command center at the Taj View Hotel fell silent, its walls stripped of maps and timelines. The daily press conferences dwindled, then ceased entirely. Only Inspector Priya Gupta maintained her ritual of reviewing the case files each morning, convinced that somewhere in the thousands of pages lay a detail they had all missed. Back in Boston, the Rodriguez family's empty house stood as a monument to interrupted lives. Aaron's medical practice partners eventually packed up his office, storing his personal effects in boxes that gathered dust in hospital storage. His patients were redistributed to other cardiologists, though many kept a photo of their beloved doctor on their refrigerators, alongside newspaper clippings about the disappearance. Each August, on the anniversary of the vanishing, Samantha's sister Catherine organized a candlelight vigil. The crowd grew smaller each year, but the core group remained steadfast medical colleagues, Chloe's former classmates, and neighbors who couldn't bring themselves to forget. They gathered in the local park where Chloe used to play soccer, sharing memories and holding onto increasingly fragile hope. The case file migrated between departments, agencies, and countries. The FBI's International Division maintained an open investigation, but active leads had dried up. Periodic reviews of the security footage yielded no new insights. The mysterious guide's face, partially captured on grainy video, was run through increasingly sophisticated facial recognition software as technology advanced, but no matches emerged. False sightings became a cruel routine. A family resembling the Rodriguez's was spotted in Mumbai in 2003, prompting a flurry of activity that led nowhere. In 2007, a psychic from California claimed to have dreamed of their location, sending investigators on another fruitless search through Agra's outlying areas. Each dead end seemed to seal the case more firmly in the realm of unsolved mysteries. Chloe's middle school class graduated without her. Her best friend Jenny kept a seat empty at graduation in her honor, placing Chloe's favorite sunflowers on the chair. The class of 2005 yearbook dedicated a full page to their missing classmate, featuring a photo of her bright smile and the quote she had chosen for her 6th grade yearbook. "Adventure is out there." Inspector Gupta, though reassigned to other cases, never fully let go. She maintained a small bulletin board in her office, updated with any new information, no matter how minor. She developed a habit of visiting the Taj Mahal on her off days, walking the same paths the family had taken, trying to understand what they might have seen or heard in their final moments. The medical community felt the loss deeply. At cardiology conferences, colleagues would share stories about Aaron's innovative research and compassionate patient care. His last published paper, submitted just weeks before the India trip, continued to be cited in cardiac research. Samantha's nursing colleagues at Boston General established a scholarship in her name for students interested in international health care. Tourism at the Taj Mahal continued unabated, but the site's security protocols underwent significant changes. Guards were more vigilant about unauthorized guides, and tourists were strictly required to stay with their assigned groups. Yet visitors who knew the story would often pause at the eastern gate, wondering about the family who had walked through it and into oblivion. As the 10th anniversary approached in 2009, a documentary filmmaker attempted to piece together the story. Interviews with investigators, family members, and tourists who had been there that day painted a picture of a perfect crime. No bodies, no witnesses, no motive. The documentary aired internationally, generating a new wave of tips, but like all leads before them, they evaporated under scrutiny. The case remained in a peculiar limbo, too significant to close, too cold to actively investigate. The Rodriguez family became urban legend, their story whispered by tour guides and debated on true crime forums. Their disappearance joined the ranks of unsolved mysteries that haunt the edges of rational explanation, a reminder that even in the modern age, people can vanish without a trace. Yet in the quiet moments of early morning, when Inspector Gupta reviewed the case files for the 1000th time, she remained convinced that somewhere, someone knew exactly what had happened on that sweltering August afternoon. The truth lay buried, waiting to be uncovered, much like the family themselves. In the early morning hours of March 15, 2019, the rhythmic pounding of demolition equipment echoed through the narrow streets of Agra's old city. A decrepit guest house, long abandoned and scheduled for urban renewal, began to crumble under the assault of progress. As chunks of plaster and brick fell away, no one expected the building's dark secrets to finally emerge into the light of day. The discovery came shortly after breakfast, when a demolition worker's sledgehammer broke through a false wall in the basement. The hollow sound drew the attention of site supervisor Rajesh Patel, who shone his flashlight into the darkness. What he saw made him stumble backward, dropping his phone as he scrambled to call the police. Within hours, the demolition site transformed into a crime scene. Forensic teams in white protective suits carefully excavated what would prove to be human remains, not one set but three. Alongside the bones lay surgical equipment, corroded by 2 decades of moisture but still recognizable to the trained eye. Plastic tubing, surgical masks, and the remnants of medical-grade storage containers painted a grim picture of the room's purpose. Inspector Priya Gupta, now nearing retirement, arrived at the scene with the same notebook she had carried 20 years earlier. The guest house stood less than 2 kilometers from the Taj Mahal's eastern gate, along the same route where security cameras had last captured the Rodriguez family. Her hands trembled as she watched forensic technicians carefully bag a child's bracelet, its silver charm still bearing traces of engraved letters. Cr. Dr. Robert Chen, the medical trafficking specialist who had theorized about the case years before, flew in from Singapore to examine the scene. The layout of the basement room confirmed his worst fears. It had been set up as a crude surgical facility. Rust-stained drainage channels in the floor, mounting brackets for medical equipment on the walls, and the particular arrangement of the space all pointed to illegal organ harvesting operations. The DNA results arrived 3 weeks later, confirming what many had already suspected. The remains belonged to Aaron, Samantha, and Chloe Rodriguez. Their bones told a story of surgical precision and unimaginable cruelty. Aaron's skeletal structure showed evidence of careful organ removal, while Samantha and Chloe's remains bore signs of a quicker, more violent end. Among the evidence collected from the site, investigators found a logbook sealed in plastic, its pages containing coded entries spanning several years. Dr. Chen's expertise helped crack the cipher, revealing a systematic record of organ harvesting operations targeting medical tourists. The Rodriguez case was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern of predation on visiting healthcare professionals. The discovery sent shockwaves through the international medical community. Colleagues who had kept Aaron's memory alive through 2 decades of uncertainty now faced the brutal reality of his family's fate. At Boston General Hospital, the flag flew at half-mast as staff gathered to mourn the confirmation of their worst fears. The guest house itself became a symbol of institutional failure. Records showed it had changed ownership multiple times since 1999, each transaction more obscure than the last. Local authorities had ignored complaints about unusual nighttime activities, and building inspectors had been bribed to overlook the unauthorized basement modifications. As forensic anthropologists pieced together the family's final moments, a clearer picture emerged. Aaron, likely targeted for his medical expertise, had apparently resisted participating in illegal surgeries. The evidence suggested he had tried to protect his family, fighting back against their captors. Samantha and Chloe's positions indicated they had been held in an adjacent room, their lives used as leverage in a failed attempt to force Aaron's cooperation. The demolition that revealed their fate had been scheduled as part of Agra's modernization project, an ironic twist that highlighted how close the truth had been all along. For 20 years, tourists and locals alike had walked past the nondescript guest house, unaware that behind its walls lay the answer to one of India's most perplexing mysteries. As the sun set over Agra that evening, Inspector Gupta stood in the basement room where the Rodriguez family had spent their final moments. The weight of 2 decades lifted from her shoulders, replaced by a new burden, ensuring that those responsible would finally face justice. The discovery was not just an end to a 20-year mystery. It was the beginning of a new investigation that would uncover one of the largest organ trafficking networks in South Asia. The discovery at the abandoned guest house ignited a swift and comprehensive investigative response, unlike anything Agra had seen in decades. Within days, a joint task force assembled in a secure operations center at police headquarters, bringing together Indian law enforcement, FBI specialists, and international trafficking experts under one roof. Agent Sarah Kim, who had investigated organ trafficking cases across Asia for 15 years, immediately recognized the sophistication of the operation. The surgical equipment recovered from the basement, though degraded, bore serial numbers linking them to a series of hospital thefts across 3 countries. Each theft had occurred within months of the Rodriguez family's disappearance. The task force's first breakthrough came from analyzing the guest house's paper trail. 2 decades of property records revealed a complex web of shell companies, but one name kept surfacing in various forms: a property manager who had overseen the building during the critical period in 1999. This manager, known to locals as Mr. Shah, had vanished shortly after the Rodriguez disappearance. Deep in the archives of the Uttar Pradesh Tourism Board, investigators discovered a cache of guide certification applications from the late 1990s. Among them was a photograph that matched the man from the Taj Mahal security footage, Vikram Sharma, age 38 at the time, with the distinctive scar above his right eyebrow. His application had been rejected, but he had somehow obtained counterfeit credentials. Inspector Gupta's team began connecting seemingly unrelated missing persons cases from the same period. A pattern emerged. Medical professionals attending conferences in India had vanished from tourist sites across the country. Each disappearance had been preceded by sightings of a well-dressed man matching Sharma's description. The breakthrough in surveillance technology proved crucial. Modern facial recognition software, applied to the enhanced 1999 footage, matched Sharma to recent security camera footage from a Mumbai apartment complex. Now in his late 50s, he had altered his appearance but maintained the same methodical patterns that had made him successful 2 decades earlier. Dr. Robert Chen's analysis of the trafficking operation revealed its terrifying scope. The guest house had been merely one node in an international network that targeted medical tourists for their expertise and their organs. The Rodriguez family's case stood out because Aaron had refused to cooperate, leading to the family's murder rather than their forced participation in the scheme. As investigators pieced together the network structure, they discovered sophisticated financial trails leading through offshore accounts and cryptocurrency exchanges. The operation had evolved with technology, but its foundations were laid in the analog age of the late 1990s, when Sharma had first begun identifying potential targets at India's major tourist attractions. Local residents, previously hesitant to speak, began sharing stories of strange nighttime deliveries to the guest house. One elderly woman recalled seeing medical supplies being unloaded in the pre-dawn hours, while another remembered the sound of generators running during power outages, unusual for a supposedly vacant building. The task force's net widened as they traced Sharma's movements through the years. Hotel registries, flight manifests, and border crossing records painted a picture of a man who had continued his work while staying just beneath the radar of law enforcement. His expertise in blending into tourist crowds had made him virtually invisible until technology finally caught up with his methods. By analyzing cell phone tower data from the past 5 years, investigators tracked Sharma's regular movements between major medical conferences across Asia. Each conference was followed by disappearances, though none as high-profile as the Rodriguez case. The pattern suggested an operation that had learned from its early mistakes, becoming more selective and cautious in choosing victims. As summer turned to autumn in 2019, the investigation accelerated. Surveillance teams monitored Sharma's Mumbai apartment, watching as he continued his daily routine, unaware that 20 years of careful anonymity were about to end. The man who had walked into the Taj Mahal with the Rodriguez family was finally within reach, carrying with him the answers to questions that had haunted 2 continents for 2 decades. The arrest of Vikram Sharma occurred on a quiet Sunday morning in Mumbai, just as he was returning from his daily walk. 20 years of evading justice ended in mere seconds as tactical officers surrounded him outside his apartment building. The man who had haunted Inspector Gupta's investigation for 2 decades offered no resistance. His only response, a resigned sigh that seemed to acknowledge the inevitable. In the interrogation room at Mumbai Police Headquarters, Sharma sat calmly, his weathered face bearing the same distinctive scar that had been captured in grainy security footage 2 decades earlier. For the first 6 hours, he remained silent, watching as investigators presented their evidence piece by piece. Only when they placed the silver charm bracelet recovered from the guesthouse basement on the table did his composure crack. His confession, when it finally came, was delivered with a clinical detachment that chilled even veteran investigators. Sharma described how he had perfected his technique of identifying medical professionals among tourists, focusing on those attending conferences. The Rodriguez family had caught his attention when he overheard Aaron discussing his cardiology practice with another conference attendee in the hotel lobby. According to Sharma, the operation had been meticulously planned. He had studied official tour guide mannerisms, obtained forged credentials, and memorized obscure historical facts about the Taj Mahal to appear legitimate. The family had trusted him completely, following him willingly as he promised to show them architectural features that regular tourists never saw. The details of what happened in the guest house emerged slowly over several days of interrogation. Aaron Rodriguez had initially been offered a chance to participate in the trafficking operation, his medical expertise valued by the network. When he refused, threats against his family failed to change his mind. Sharma described Aaron's final moments of desperate resistance, trying to protect Samantha and Chloe until the very end. As Sharma's confession continued, the full scope of the trafficking network became clear. He had been one of several recruiters operating at tourist sites across Asia, each targeting medical professionals who could be coerced into performing illegal surgeries. The Rodriguez case had been an anomaly. Most victims were forced to comply through threats to their families, then released with warnings to remain silent. The network's records, maintained meticulously through coded ledgers and encrypted files, revealed operations spanning 15 countries. Sharma's testimony led investigators to storage facilities containing medical equipment, falsified documents, and evidence linking the organization to dozens of unsolved disappearances. Inspector Gupta, present throughout the interrogation, watched as 2 decades of theories and suspicions were finally confirmed. The mysterious guide from the security footage. The man who had haunted her career now sat before her, methodically dismantling his own criminal enterprise with each careful statement. Sharma's cooperation led to simultaneous raids across 3 continents. Safe houses were breached, surgical facilities shut down, and 11 other key members of the network taken into custody. The organization's financial records revealed profits in the hundreds of millions, all built on the suffering of families like the Rodriguez's. In the final hours of his confession, Sharma revealed the location of additional evidence that would ensure convictions for the entire network. His precise memory of events, dates, and locations helped investigators close dozens of cold cases, bringing closure to families who had waited years for answers. When asked why he had finally chosen to confess, Sharma glanced at the silver charm bracelet that still lay on the interrogation room table. 20 years is a long time to carry the eyes of a child in your memory, he said quietly, before providing the final details that would seal his fate and that of his conspirators. The breakthrough had taken 20 years, but in the end, it came not through a single dramatic revelation, but through the patient accumulation of evidence, technological advancement, and the weight of guilt that had finally become too heavy for even a hardened criminal to bear. The Rodriguez family had at last received justice, though the price had been paid in decades of uncertainty and grief. In December 2019, the Mumbai Central Court fell silent as Judge Rajesh Patel delivered his verdict. 12 members of one of Asia's largest organ trafficking networks stood in the dock, their fate sealed by months of testimony, forensic evidence, and the detailed confession of Vikram Sharma. The sentence was unequivocal life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was filled with families of victims, including Catherine Brooks, Samantha Rodriguez's sister, who had traveled from Boston to witness justice being served. She clutched a photograph of the Rodriguez family, taken just days before their fatal trip to the Taj Mahal. As the verdicts were read, 20 years of anguish finally found release in her quiet tears. The trial had revealed the horrifying scope of the trafficking operation. Over 2 decades, the network had targeted more than 50 medical professionals at tourist sites across Asia. The Rodriguez family's case, though tragic, had ultimately led to the network's downfall. Their deaths had left behind evidence that, combined with advancing technology and relentless investigation, eventually illuminated a vast criminal enterprise. In the aftermath of the verdicts, changes rippled through the international medical tourism industry. The World Health Organization established new security protocols for medical conferences, implementing strict identification requirements and security measures for attendees and their families. Tourist sites across Asia underwent comprehensive security reviews, with particular attention paid to guide verification systems. The Taj Mahal, where the tragedy had begun, instituted a complete overhaul of its tour guide program. Every guide now underwent thorough background checks, carried digitally verified credentials, and was monitored through a sophisticated tracking system. The Eastern Gate, where the Rodriguez family had last been seen, became the site of a small memorial plaque, reminding visitors of the price paid for these security measures. Boston General Hospital, where both Aaron and Samantha had worked, established the Rodriguez Family Foundation for Medical Safety. The foundation focused on protecting healthcare professionals working internationally, providing security training and support services. Chloe's former middle school created a scholarship in her name, awarded annually to students interested in pursuing careers in medicine or international relations. Inspector Priya Gupta, who had carried the case through 2 decades, attended the dedication of a new wing at the Uttar Pradesh Police Academy. The Rodriguez Investigation Center would train future detectives in the integration of traditional investigative techniques with modern technology. Her case files, meticulously maintained over 20 years, became teaching materials for a new generation of investigators. The guest house where the family had met their fate was demolished completely, replaced by a community health center. The decision, made in consultation with the Rodriguez family's relatives, transformed a site of darkness into one of healing. The center specialized in providing care to underprivileged children, turning tragedy into hope for future generations. In Boston, the annual candlelight vigil transformed into a celebration of life and justice. Catherine Brooks spoke to the gathered crowd about forgiveness and persistence, sharing how the truth had finally emerged from the shadows. The medical community, which had never forgotten their lost colleagues, established an annual lecture series on medical ethics and human trafficking awareness. Vikram Sharma and his associates began their sentences in maximum security prisons across India. Their confessions continued to yield information about other trafficking operations, leading to additional investigations and arrests worldwide. The international organ trafficking trade had received a significant blow, though authorities remained vigilant against similar operations. 20 years after 3 Americans vanished at India's most famous monument, their story had become more than a tragedy. It had catalyzed changes in international tourism security, medical conference protocols, and law enforcement cooperation. The Rodriguez family's legacy lived on in the strengthened systems designed to prevent similar crimes, and in the countless lives saved by the exposure of the trafficking network. As Inspector Gupta finally cleared her office bulletin board, carefully preserving 2 decades of investigation materials in the Academy's archives, she reflected on how a single family's fate had ultimately protected so many others. The truth had taken 20 years to emerge, but its impact would be felt for generations to come.